The movie begins by telling the story of Bob Langmore, an ordinary man who lives in a small town in northern Canada and works at a lumber mill. Bob has a small family, his ex-wife Darlene and his 16-year-old daughter Eva. Bob is trying to adjust to his new life after the divorce, but it's clear that his relationship with both his ex-wife and his daughter is strained. Eva becomes obsessed with learning more about her father, and she decides to go with her friends to an abandoned psychiatric hospital to discover more information about her grandfather, who is Bob's father. At the same time, Bob feels extremely stressed at work, so he decides to take a few days off and go on a trip. On his way, Bob stops by a local bar and sees a drug dealer there. The dealer recognizes Bob from their old hockey days and tries to offer him drugs, but Bob firmly decides to stay away from that life. Bob starts feeling even more pressure, so he decides to inspect a machine at the mill that crushes wood. He climbs on top of the crusher and looks down into it as if he's about to throw himself into the blades. His dark thoughts are suddenly interrupted when a coworker calls his name, and Bob decides to step away from the idea for the moment. Later, Bob prepares his bags to take a few days off and start his trip. In the middle of the night, he suddenly feels extremely sick and experiences terrible pain, causing him to lose control of his car and drive off the road. Bob tries to deal with the situation and decides to call Nelson, who turns out to be the boss of the drug dealer. Nelson agrees to help him, takes him to his house, and tries to calm him down. After that, Bob stops at a roadside cafe and rushes to the restroom to wash the blood off his face. He tries to hide the blood and cleans his bandaged hand, but when he checks his body he realizes that a part of him has become invisible, revealing his internal organs. Bob quickly wraps himself in a towel and leaves the bathroom to return to his table. Nelson soon arrives and agrees to tow Bob's car and fix it, but only if Bob works for him as a courier or delivery driver, especially since they are heading in the same direction. Nelson tries to act friendly with Bob and talks about their old hockey days, even telling him that he still watches Bob's old games. Bob tries to avoid the conversation, but Nelson decides to give him a Chinese herbal medicine from a shop he knows. Bob takes the medicine and returns home. Darlene allows him inside, and Eva is happy to see her father again, but she feels hurt when he refuses to take her with him. Bob then leaves to meet Nelson, leaving Eva feeling upset. At the workshop, Bob gives his friend the package and tries to hide the fact that he's sick. The shop owner warns Bob that working with Nelson is very dangerous and tells him to think about his future. Still, he hands Bob the package and tries to help him when he notices how exhausted he looks. Bob returns home, and Eva suddenly shows up because she wants to talk to her father for a while, but Bob decides to leave again, abandoning the conversation. Eva feels hurt and decides to go with her friends to the abandoned hospital. Later, Bob begins feeling even worse, so he takes the Chinese medicine again. When he returns home, Eva notices how sick he looks and asks him about her grandfather's diagnosis. Bob explains that her grandfather had serious mental problems and eventually chose to end his own life. After that conversation, Eva leaves and runs off to meet her friends. Darlene and Bob become extremely worried about their daughter and start searching for her, but she's nowhere to be found, either at the hospital nor at the police station. Darlene goes to report her daughter missing while Bob begins searching through Eva's belongings. He finds her phone and reads messages between her and her friends about a trip they had planned. Bob and Darlene go to one of Eva's friends' houses, but her father says she isn't there. Bob then calls Nelson and tells him the delivery will be delayed, which makes Nelson very angry. Later, Bob finds Eva's friends, but they act in an irritating and disrespectful way, causing Bob to lose his temper. After a fight, one of them admits they were at the abandoned hospital. At that moment, Bob realizes that Eva had been trying to find information about her grandfather. At the same time, Eva wakes up from a coma inside an iron cage. She finds a Chinese doctor and his assistants surrounding her. They strap her to a bed and begin examining her body. That's when it's revealed that Eva has inherited the same illness from both her father and grandfather, and just like her father, her body slowly begins to turn invisible. Bob and Darlene decide to go to the abandoned hospital and enter the section that is still operating. Security tries to stop them, but Bob fights with them and collapses to the ground in severe pain. The head doctor arrives and immediately recognizes Bob and his father. She asks Darlene to leave Bob at the hospital because he is very sick. At that moment, Bob begins remembering himself as a young boy in the same place. After that, Bob begins arguing with the doctor, who believes that what happened to his father was a tragic accident because she saw it with her own eyes. The doctor admits that Bob's father actually wanted to die in order to hide his illness from people, and he was afraid for his family. Bob clearly remembers that his father asked him not to see him. The doctor reminds him that she couldn't stop the illness, but she tried to protect the man. She shows Bob his father's room, the place where he used to watch his son's life from afar. She offers Bob the chance to stay at the hospital, promising that she will treat him and take care of him. But Bob refuses because he knows his daughter needs him. Despite that, the doctors keep him in the hospital. In the middle of the night, Bob wakes up to the sound of a door opening. He notices that the hallway is completely empty and that the keys to all the rooms are lying on the table. Bob decides to get dressed and leave. He arrives at his house but doesn't find Darlene there. The only person present is her friend, who is also worried about her own daughter. Nelson calls again and starts threatening Bob, telling him that he knows everything about his family's history. This causes Bob to completely lose his temper. Darlene's friend hears Nelson's threats and tells Bob that he needs to act quickly because no one knows where the kidnapped girls are. Bob decides to go back to his daughter's friend's house. There he meets the girl, who admits that she discovered her friend's secret and realized that she is just like her father. The girl explains that when they went down into the abandoned hospital, they were surprised to find a wheelchair in the basement surrounded by darkness. In the darkness they saw someone covered with a blanket, but suddenly the blanket moved and there was no one underneath it. Then someone suddenly appeared behind them holding a flashlight. When they got scared and started running, the girl noticed Eva's arm and saw that part of it was transparent. That frightened her, so they left Eva alone in the hospital and haven't known anything about her since. The girl gives Bob his daughter's bag. When he checks it, he finds Chinese herbs inside, similar to the ones he got from the workshop owner. Bob decides to go to the workshop and ask about the kidnapped girls because he suspects the man might be involved in the kidnappings due to the tea he sells. However, the workshop owner becomes angry at the accusation. Even though he admits he sometimes does illegal things, he says he is also a father and a grandfather, and would never kidnap anyone. The workshop owner tells Bob about a Chinese pharmacy, so Bob decides to go there. Bob finds the woman who runs the pharmacy and tells her about his missing daughter. The woman seems very afraid of him. It's clear she knows something but doesn't want to tell the truth. Bob notices his daughter's bicycle behind the shop and removes his hat. The woman becomes even more frightened when she sees that parts of his body are disappearing. She realizes that the girl is exactly like him. She tries to protect the doctor and briefly glances toward his office. In that moment, Bob quickly rushes toward the office, removes his clothes on the way, and goes down into the basement. There he finds the doctor and his assistant. Bob attacks them and demands that they return his daughter. A moment later he hears Eva calling his name from inside a cage. When Eva sees what her father looks like, she becomes terrified, but he reassures her and opens the cage. The doctor manages to injure Bob, but in the end Bob escapes with his daughter. The pharmacy owner gives them a box of tea as a gift and says it will help Eva get better. She advises them to run away. The father and daughter arrive home, and Darlene immediately begins helping Eva. It turns out that she already knows the father's secret and understands what is happening, but she never told Eva because she was afraid for her. The next morning Bob wakes up and tells his daughter that he must leave because of his illness. Eva admits that she also quit sports when she started experiencing the same condition. She thought she was the only one dealing with it, but it turns out that both her father and grandfather went through the same thing. After a while Bob begins preparing to leave, even though Eva doesn't want him to go. Bob admits that his strength is fading and that people might discover his secret. He says goodbye to her. At that moment Eva appears at the doorway carrying her bag because she wants to take her father herself. Her mother agrees through tears. They drive down the road, and Eva starts asking him questions. Bob admits that after what he witnessed as a child, he couldn't force his family to live with the burden of his illness, so he chose to leave. Eva promises him that she will make up for everything they missed in their relationship. They reach the place where Nelson's new courier is waiting, someone Bob needs to meet. But Bob notices that his face has started to disappear. Eva quickly uses makeup to cover the missing parts of his face. Bob meets the courier, hands over the package he was carrying for Nelson, and immediately returns to the car. They soon arrive back at Bob's house. Bob gives Eva the tea he got from the Chinese woman and tells her to drink it. He reassures her that she can live peacefully because people in the north usually mind their own business. At the same time, Nelson opens the package and realizes he has been tricked. Later, Eva goes shopping, and the shopkeeper notices something unusual and realizes she is like her father. After a while, Eva tries to calm her father, who has now become almost completely transparent. Suddenly he tells her that she needs to leave because he won't be able to do what he planned later. He says he is now ready to disappear at the lumber mill, just like he tried to do earlier in the beginning of the movie. Despite her protests, Bob leaves and goes to the mill. He stands on top of the wood crusher again. At that moment, Nelson breaks into the house with a gun and threatens Eva, demanding to know where Bob is. Even though Eva tells him that her father sold the house, Nelson realizes she is lying because Bob's belongings are still there. He accuses Bob of betrayal and decides to take revenge on his daughter. But suddenly Nelson is thrown away from Eva. She realizes that her father, now completely invisible, has returned. Bob uses his invisibility to attack Nelson and demands that he leave his family alone. However, he misjudges his strength and ends up killing Nelson. Bob then confesses to his daughter that he couldn't leave her again and that he will stay with her forever. After that, they get rid of Nelson's body and dump it in a landfill. Later, Eva buys herself a pair of tinted sunglasses and sits in an empty car talking to her father. He advises her to drink the magical tea because it will help her. He also tells her that when she was 6 years old, he used to secretly follow her on her way to school just to make sure she was safe. He also remembers that his father once told him he didn't want his son to see him in that condition. At the time, Bob thought he meant death. But that raises an important question: who actually helped his father escape from the psychiatric hospital? Eva immediately remembers the white figure she saw in the basement. She smiles and suggests that they go talk to her grandfather, who might still be there but never shows himself to anyone. They buckle their seatbelts and drive off down the road. And that's where the movie ends. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.